They dragged her out like a criminal, heels echoing across marble floors she personally approved years ago. Guests filmed, murmured, judged. None realized the woman being humiliated in broad daylight owned every chandelier above their heads. Celeste Whitaker didn't scream. She didn't resist. She didn't need to. 9 minutes later, she'd return not as a victim, but as the reckoning. This wasn't just about race, or ego, or power. It was about legacy, and what happens when the system underestimates the very woman who built it. Watch carefully. You're not just witnessing revenge. You're watching an empire reclaim its crown. The marble floor of the Whitestone Regent Hotel glistened like a stage set for humiliation. Celeste Whitaker's heels clicked steadily as two uniformed security guards, Steve and Rick, flanked her, their grip on her arms firm, but not brutal. Not yet. Her sleek, navy wool coat fluttered slightly with each step, trailing behind like a torn flag of dignity. The afternoon sun poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the unfolding scene as guests whispered, filmed, and silently judged. They didn't know her name. Not yet. All they saw was a black woman being marched out of a luxury hotel. Her face betrayed nothing. Chin high, eyes forward. She didn't speak. She didn't resist. She didn't plead. To do so would feed the narrative Derek Hunter Blake, the general manager, had spent the last 15 minutes crafting: unruly guest, possible scammer, potential threat. Behind the mahogany front desk, Hunter stood with his arms folded, a smug grin tucked beneath his graying beard. "Let this be a lesson," he called out to no one in particular. "We have standards here." The sentence hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. A group of tourists paused mid-check-in. A child clutched her mother's hand tighter. An elderly couple looked on, eyes wide, mouths slightly parted. Phones emerged, not to intervene, but to record. Celeste's briefcase fell open during the procession, scattering crisp documents across the floor like paper confetti at the wrong kind of celebration. Business cards, legal contracts, a conference badge. Rick kicked one aside, never bothering to read it. And then came the whisper. A middle-aged man in a charcoal blazer leaned toward his companion, voice barely audible over the soft music playing in the lobby. "Is it just me? Or does she look like that CEO, the one from Forbes? Sterling something?" His companion frowned. "No way. Someone like that wouldn't be treated like this." Exactly. The revolving doors approached. Each step toward them felt like surrender, but Celeste's gaze didn't waver. Marcus Thompson, the 19-year-old valet who'd parked her black Jaguar F-Type coupe just hours ago, stood frozen near the entrance. His mouth opened slightly as he watched her pass. He recognized that briefcase, that presence, the same woman who tipped him with a folded $100 bill and said, "Always treat people like they might be your future boss." Now she was being tossed like yesterday's trash. Celeste didn't glance at him, didn't look back, but Marcus saw it all. Outside, the city bustled, indifferent. Horns honked, taxis idled, businessmen rushed past with suitcases and coffee. Celeste stepped onto the sidewalk, heels meeting concrete like punctuation. Steve leaned in. "Ma'am, this is where we let go. You are now trespassing if you re-enter." She nodded once. Understood. He seemed almost disappointed she wasn't going to scream. Inside the lobby, Hunter turned to Jessica Monroe, his assistant manager, who was still holding up her phone. "Filming." "Upload it," he said. "Add the hashtag. You know the one." Jessica smirked. "Nah, guest gone wild?" Hunter chuckled. "Perfect." Back outside, Celeste reached into her coat pocket and retrieved her phone. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice, when she began recording, was low and deliberate. Documentation log, Whitestone Regent Hotel, 3:08 p.m. Subject, unlawful removal of CEO from privately owned property. Names involved: Hunter Blake, General Manager; Jessica Monroe, Assistant; Security personnel: Steve Morrison, Rick Patterson; racial bias suspected; will confirm. She ended the recording. A cold wind whipped past, catching the hem of her coat. Celeste tightened her scarf, then pulled out a second phone. Burner line, used only for crisis escalation. She pressed speed dial. "David," she said when the line connected. "We have a situation." David Rodriguez, head of corporate security and former FBI forensic analyst, didn't need more context. Priority level? Black level. Full asset protection protocol. Background on Hunter Blake. Any red flags? I want them all. "You'll have it in 30. She hung up and called the next number. "Patricia, civil action begins immediately. Discrimination, defamation, abuse of authority, add corporate sabotage to the list." Patricia Chen, chief legal counsel for Sterling Legacy Resorts, responded without pause. "Local counsel mobilizing. Shall I notify PR?" "Not yet," Celeste said. "I'll handle the optics. Quiet for now." Marcus watched from inside. He saw her calm, her control, and he remembered the Sterling Legacy business card she had handed him earlier, with her name and the title, Founder and CEO. His stomach dropped. Inside the hotel, Hunter preened in front of his staff. "You see, this is why you trust your instincts. The second she walked in here, I knew something was off." Jessica laughed. "Yeah, like she thought she owned the place." "Exactly," Hunter said. "People like that always try to act important." Maria Santos, the housekeeping supervisor, frowned from the back of the room. She didn't laugh. She didn't speak, because she remembered the face of every guest treated unfairly, and something about this one felt wrong. Celeste opened her laptop on the hood of her car, fingers flying across the keyboard. She drafted a report with timestamps, quotes, violations, screenshots of confirmation emails, photos of the penthouse suite's filth. She linked state law, federal policy, and corporate regulation. Her final line: "What they attempted was not just disrespect, it was theft of identity, dignity, and agency, and they failed." Across the street, a young woman eating at the cafe had been watching the whole scene unfold. She looked at her phone, then at Celeste, then opened Twitter. "Just watched a black woman get dragged out of a hotel in Atlanta. But the way she moved? I think she's someone important, like dangerously important. Stay tuned." The tweet was posted at 3:14 p.m. It would have 1.2 million views by midnight. And Celeste? She simply stood still, breathing deeply, because 9 minutes was all it took to reset the balance. The morning sun gleamed off the sleek curves of the black Jaguar F-Type as it slid into the circular driveway of the Whitestone Regent Hotel. It didn't roar like other luxury cars. It whispered, clean, precise, efficient. The valet station activated like muscle memory. Marcus Thompson straightened his jacket, adjusted his cap, and stepped forward. He didn't recognize the woman who stepped out at first, not until she closed the car door with a gloved hand and smiled with a calmness that seemed rehearsed. "Morning," she said. "Take good care of her." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, reaching for the keys. The subtle southern cadence in her voice reminded him of his grandmother, grounded, unshakable. Celeste Whitaker didn't carry herself like a billionaire. No entourage, no barking assistants. Her tailored gray pantsuit was high quality, but subtle. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her makeup minimal. A small rolling suitcase followed behind her, and a leather briefcase rested comfortably in her hand. She looked like a regional manager, maybe legal counsel. No one would peg her as the founder of the entire Sterling Legacy Resorts empire, and that was the point. For years, Celeste had operated by a simple principle: you can't fix what you can't see. Surprise inspections allowed her to experience what her guests experienced. The true test of hospitality wasn't in boardroom presentations. It was in tone of voice, in hallway glances, in who was offered help and who was ignored. She paused just outside the rotating doors, took a breath, and entered. The Whitestone Regent's lobby was designed to impress. Crystal chandeliers, polished on stone columns, curated scent diffusers set to change subtly every hour. It was the flagship of her 60-property empire, and she'd spared no expense making it feel like old money grace met modern precision. And yet, something felt off. At the front desk, a man in his early 50s scanned the room like he owned it. Hunter Blake. Celeste recognized him immediately, though they'd never met. She'd approved his hiring 3 years ago, based on a spotless resume and excellent reviews from a rival hotel group. Now, as she approached, she noticed the way his eyes flicked over her, head to toe, then back again. His smile was there, but tight. His posture relaxed, but guarded. "Good morning," she offered first. Hunter responded with a perfunctory nod. "Afternoon, technically. How can I assist you?" "I'd like to reserve the penthouse suite," she said, placing her American Express Centurion card on the counter. "For immediate check-in." He didn't reach for the card immediately. "That's quite a request. The penthouse is reserved for our most exclusive clients. Are you sure that's what you meant?" "Yes," Celeste replied evenly. "I've stayed in it before." Hunter finally picked up the card, turning it over like it might dissolve in his fingers. "You do realize the nightly rate is—" "I do." He ran the card through the system once, then again. Frowned. "I'm sorry," he said, feigning sympathy. "We're having trouble processing your card." "It's working fine," she said calmly. "Try the backup terminal." Hunter's eyes narrowed just slightly. He waved over his assistant manager. Jessica Monroe, mid-30s, overly styled blonde curls, pearl earrings that matched her artificial smile. She leaned close and whispered something that made Hunter smirk. "Ma'am," Jessica said, louder now, "there's a Holiday Inn just 2 blocks down that might better suit your needs." Celeste didn't flinch. "Run the card again, please." This time, it went through. The screen flashed approved, but there was no apology, no concierge welcome, no mention of complimentary services, no champagne like the white man next to her received seconds earlier. Hunter handed over the room key with fingers that barely brushed hers. "Room 4701. Elevators to your left." "No bellhop?" "We're understaffed today," Jessica offered. Celeste took the key and turned without a word. In the elevator, she let out a slow exhale. Her phone buzzed with a message from her executive assistant confirming 2 meetings later that day. One with a nonprofit she quietly funded, another with a legal reform committee pushing for anti-discrimination legislation. But for now, she was just a woman in a luxury hotel, a woman who was being watched. As the elevator doors opened to the penthouse floor, Celeste stepped out into a hallway that smelled faintly of mildew. That wasn't right. The cleaning team used citrus and jasmine. She unlocked the suite. The moment the door opened, the smell hit her like a slap. Sweat, old food, maybe something worse. Inside, the air was heavy with heat. The thermostat blinked at 85 degrees, the air conditioning groaning like a wounded animal. The bed was unmade, sheets crumpled, pillows askew, one corner of the comforter stained with something rust-colored. The bathroom door stood open, revealing towels on the floor and someone else's toiletries left on the counter. Celeste stood still for a long moment. This wasn't an accident. She didn't call the front desk right away. She took out her phone, documenting everything. Time-stamped photos, a slow video pan across the room, close-up shots of the stained linens, the bathroom mirror smudged with fingerprints. Only then did she dial. "Front desk," Hunter's voice answered. "This is guest in 4701, she said. "The room is unacceptable. Please send housekeeping and maintenance immediately." "Apologies," Hunter said, oozing false concern. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked today. No other rooms available." "I saw the occupancy board behind your desk. You're at 62%. A pause. "I'll have to check again." "No need," she said, voice icy. "I'll be down in person." "Ma'am, that's unnecessary." But she had already hung up. Celeste stood in the middle of the ruined penthouse, breathing slowly, eyes focused. This wasn't just about service failure. This was a message. The problem was, They didn't know who they were sending it to. The heat in the penthouse suite pressed down like a punishment. Celeste loosened the top button of her blouse but made no move toward the malfunctioning thermostat. She wasn't about to touch anything else in this room. Not yet. The sour scent of dried sweat and artificial air freshener clung to the walls. Celeste moved methodically, snapping photos with her phone. A stain on the bedsheet, dark, rust-colored, pulled her attention. She leaned in, careful not to touch. It could have been wine, could have been coffee, but the pattern looked eerily like blood. Dripped, not spilled. She turned to the bathroom. The sink was cluttered with abandoned travel-size products. Razor with a hair still clinging to it. Soap bar worn thin. An open deodorant stick resting on the counter as if the user had just stepped out. Towels tossed on the floor, one of them faintly smeared with makeup. This wasn't simple negligence. This was crafted chaos. Celeste stepped back into the center of the room and let her gaze sweep the space like a forensic analyst. The way the blanket hung, the specific placement of used items. The room hadn't just been left uncleaned. It had been staged. Someone wanted to provoke a reaction. She walked to the minibar, pulled open the door, and counted. 3 bottles missing. Not a problem, except she hadn't touched a single one. She photographed the inventory sheet. Then she noticed something subtle, a tiny indentation in the plush carpet near the corner of the dresser, a small, circular shape. She knelt slowly, squinted. A lens. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breath didn't change. She simply pulled a silk handkerchief from her pocket and used it to gently nudge the dresser. A tiny black object fell forward. A micro camera, smaller than a USB drive. Celeste's expression remained blank as she picked it up using the edge of the handkerchief and slipped it into an evidence bag she kept in her briefcase. Her training as a military prosecutor had taught her never to assume incompetence when malice was more plausible, and this wasn't sloppy hospitality. This was entrapment. She scanned the rest of the room. Smoke detector, slightly off-center. She reached up, unscrewed the cover. Another lens. 2 cameras. She took a slow breath. Someone wanted footage of her reacting, yelling, throwing something, calling names. They wanted to show an angry black woman breaking down in luxury, justifying whatever consequences came next. Someone was building a narrative. They just hadn't counted on her choosing silence over spectacle. Her phone buzzed. A message from David, her head of security. Hunter Blake, minor infractions at previous property. Settled 2 discrimination complaints privately. Nothing public. Social media clean. No criminal record. But Celeste opened the attachment. He co-owns a real estate LLC with a shell corp linked to Chiselhurst Holdings, major competitor of Sterling Legacy. Pattern suggests he's helping sabotage internal properties for discounted buyout bids. Her fingers tightened slightly on the phone. The pieces snapped together. This wasn't just racism. This was business sabotage masked as racial profiling. Someone wanted Sterling Legacy's flagship to fail, publicly, and in a way that discredited her leadership. Celeste tapped a quick response. Start background on Jessica Monroe. Financials, communications. See if she's looped in. Then she walked to the window, pushing the drapes aside. The view was spectacular. Skyline glittering in the afternoon sun. Traffic below flowing like lazy rivers of steel. A perfect setting for disgrace, for humiliation. If she hadn't known better, she might have believed she was losing control of her own empire. But the truth was simpler. Someone thought she wouldn't fight back. Her phone rang. Patricia, her legal counsel. I've drafted the cease and desist notices, Patricia said without preamble. We'll deliver them within the hour. Do you want to go public? Not yet, Celeste replied. I want them comfortable, reckless. Then we wait. We prepare. Celeste hung up and returned to the bathroom. She opened the cabinet under the sink and spotted a third device. This one slightly larger, with a blinking red light barely visible behind the cleaning supplies. 3 hidden cameras. She retrieved a small signal detector from her briefcase, a tool she carried not out of paranoia, but experience. She swept it slowly across the suite. The device buzzed again near the coat rack by the entry. 4. This was an operation, not an accident. Back in the main room, Celeste sat at the edge of the stained bed, not touching the sheets, and opened her laptop. She accessed the internal systems of Sterling Legacy via secure VPN, pulling up last month's expense reports for the Whitestone Regent. Hunter had approved $12,000 in maintenance upgrades for the penthouse suite. There were no upgrades. The money trail led to a contractor that didn't exist, another shell company tied to Chiselhurst Holdings. It wasn't just sabotage, it was theft. Celeste didn't smile. She rarely did during battle, but there was a distinct shift in her posture, a stillness sharpened by purpose. The room wasn't her failure. It was her proof. And someone had just handed her the sword to cut them down. From outside the suite, she heard faint footsteps, 2 sets. A soft knock at the door. "Ma'am?" came Jessica's voice. "Just checking if you're settling in okay." Celeste didn't answer. She walked to the door, pulled it open, and looked Jessica directly in the eye. Jessica blinked. We just got word from the front desk that you were having trouble." Celeste tilted her head. "Were you instructed to film me today?" Jessica's lips parted, confused. Excuse me? Did anyone tell you to provoke me, to bait me? Or was that your idea?" Jessica straightened. "Ma'am, I don't appreciate the tone. Then I suggest you recalibrate your expectations," Celeste said calmly. "Because the only thing worse than being caught filming without consent is being caught covering for someone who planned it." Jessica's face went pale. Celeste held her gaze for a beat longer, then closed the door slowly, deliberately. She turned back to the wreck of a room, now fully documented, every lie archived, every slight catalogued. They wanted a reaction. They were about to get one. The elevator descended in tense silence, each floor ding punctuating Celeste's measured breaths. Her briefcase was secured at her side, the evidence inside now damning enough to sink a regional chain, let alone one hotel. But she didn't stride out of the elevator like a storm. That's what they wanted. Emotion, outburst, a scene. Instead, she stepped into the Whitestone Regent's lobby with the quiet gravity of someone who had already begun writing the last chapter of someone else's career. Conversations hummed around her, the click of cutlery in the hotel cafe, the dull thump of suitcases rolling across marble. But all of it thinned the moment guests noticed her again. Wasn't that the woman from earlier? The one who just checked in? Celeste approached the front desk. Hunter Blake looked up from his monitor, brows raised as if annoyed by an interruption. "Yes? My suite is uninhabitable," she said evenly. "Temperatures over 85 degrees. The bed is soiled. There are personal effects in the bathroom." Hunter tilted his head, forcing a sympathetic frown. "I'm so sorry to hear that. But unfortunately, we're at capacity. No other rooms available." Celeste's voice remained level. "Your digital occupancy board reads 61%. I'll accept another suite on any floor." He leaned slightly forward, lowering his tone. "Ma'am, if you're unhappy here, perhaps you'd prefer a refund. Or there's a Courtyard Marriott nearby. Might be a better fit." A few heads turned. Not many, but enough. From the corner, Jessica Monroe appeared like a hawk scenting weakness, her posture overly polite. Phone already in hand. "We'd really appreciate it if you didn't make a scene, ma'am," she said with feigned sweetness. Celeste turned to her. "This is not a scene. This is a request for basic standards." "Your voice is elevated," Jessica said, raising her own slightly. "We're trying to serve other guests. If you continue disrupting—" "I haven't raised my voice," Celeste interrupted, still calm. "You're attempting to escalate." Jessica glanced at the camera behind the check-in desk, subtle, angled toward them. Not hidden, but helpful if one wanted a particular narrative on record. Hunter clapped his hands softly. "Security," he called, not yelling, just loud enough to be heard by the nearby concierge. From across the lobby, Marcus Thompson paused mid-task, turning slowly toward the front desk. He saw Celeste, saw the tightening circle of hotel staff around her, saw Jessica's phone subtly angling upward, likely recording again. Then he saw it, just as Celeste reached for her briefcase to retrieve a copy of her reservation, a flash of silver in the inner pocket, a name badge. Sterling Legacy Resorts, Celeste Whitaker, founder and CEO. His heart stopped. He took a half step forward, then caught himself. That woman, she owns all of this. No one else seemed to notice. He looked at Hunter, whose eyes flicked to him sharply. Just for a second, enough to say, "Stay out of this." Hunter stepped closer to Celeste. "Ma'am, for your safety and that of our other guests, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice and return to your room." Celeste didn't move. "I'm not the one creating a disturbance, but I will stand here and document every interaction if necessary." Jessica let out a small, performative sigh. "We've tried to be patient." Hunter leaned in slightly and whispered, just enough for Celeste and nearby guests straining to listen, to hear. "Don't push it. This isn't New York." Celeste gave him a measured look. "No, it's Atlanta, where discrimination lawsuits settle for 7 figures and reputations evaporate overnight." Jessica blinked, taken off guard, but Hunter straightened, recovering. "Security's on their way," he said again. Marcus was still frozen, torn. His instincts screamed to intervene, but his brain held him hostage with the memory of his last warning. 2 months ago, he'd spoken up when a bellhop shoved an elderly couple's luggage and called it ghetto trash. Hunter had slapped him with a written notice, excessive emotional engagement with guests. Now he watched as Celeste, his CEO, was being set up for another viral takedown. The phones were out again. Guests whispered. Jessica leaned against the desk, phone tilted just so. "Honestly, I've had enough. People come in here thinking they can throw their weight around." Celeste didn't respond. She didn't touch her phone. She simply adjusted the strap on her briefcase and took one step to the side, so the camera behind Jessica caught her face full on. Hunter tried again. "Last warning. Go back to your room or you'll be removed." Celeste met his eyes. "You can call whoever you like. Just remember, everything you do from this point forward is being logged under a corporate timestamp." That landed. Hunter's jaw twitched. Jessica scoffed. "Corporate timestamp? Are you trying to sound official?" Before anyone could answer, Steve and Rick, the same security guards from before, entered the lobby. Steve looked bored. Rick, slightly too eager. Celeste didn't flinch. Behind the concierge desk, Marcus moved closer, pretending to adjust a vase of orchids. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us," Steve said. Rick cracked his knuckles. "No resistance, please. It's just for documentation purposes." Jessica's phone was definitely recording now. Hunter turned his back, muttering, "Take her outside and de-escalate." Celeste looked over her shoulder and caught Marcus's eyes. He looked stricken. She gave the smallest nod, then turned and walked between the 2 guards without another word. Jessica whispered behind her, "This is going to blow up so good online." Marcus clenched his fists, eyes on the briefcase, on that name badge. That one sliver of truth no one else had noticed. He didn't speak, not yet, but something had shifted. The wind outside the Whitestone Regent Hotel slapped against Celeste's face like a reminder of the game being played, of the stakes that had just changed. She stood at the curb, her breath steady, eyes fixed not on the building behind her, but on the horizon beyond it. She didn't speak, not yet. Instead, she opened her briefcase, retrieved the secured corporate phone, the one used only for high-priority executive communication, and scrolled to a single name. She hit dial. "Rodriguez," came the voice on the other end. "David, full containment protocol, category black." There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end shifted into professional sharpness. "Acknowledged. Who's involved?" "Hunter Blake, General Manager, Jessica Monroe, Assistant Manager, 2 security guards, Steve Morrison and Rick Patterson. I also suspect cooperation with outside actors. possibly third-party financial entities. David Rodriguez, former FBI agent and current head of Sterling Legacy's Internal Protection Division, didn't ask for clarification. He never did. What's your immediate need? I want digital sweeps of all hotel security footage, staff communications for the past 6 months, internal audit on penthouse bookings and maintenance expenses. Look for routing patterns, vendors, contractors, offshore accounts. Something's bleeding money. David let out a short breath. You think they're washing funds? Not yet. I know they're staging service failures. That's step 1 of a devaluation scheme. Copy that. I'll start the background scrub and dispatch the forensic accounting team. ETA 40 minutes. Celeste ended the call. Next, she dialed her legal counsel. Patricia, she said, you good? They dragged me out of my own hotel, so no, but that's not the point. We're moving to litigation. I want demand letters drafted in the next 60 minutes. Civil rights violations, emotional distress, defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, and have them ready to name individuals, not just the corporation. Understood. Where are we going loud? Not yet, Celeste said. We'll go quiet first. I want them to feel safe. I want them to relax. Got it, Patricia replied. I'll mobilize the crisis legal team. Before she hung up, Celeste added, pull the non-disclosure agreements for all executive-level staff. I want to know who else could be leaking internal information to outside investors. Click. She wasn't done. Opening a secure app, she initiated an encrypted conference line. 2 more names appeared. Melissa Zhang, Director of Financial Compliance, and Dr. Isaac Grant, Lead Counsel for Investment Oversight. When they answered, she didn't waste time. I need full review on Whitestone Regent's last quarter, vendor payments, occupancy reports, housekeeping service fees, especially anything labeled discretionary repair. Cross-check all accounts tied to Blake's digital signature. Melissa answered first. Already flagged anomalies on 2 contractor payments last month. Both paid to different LLCs, but registered to the same P.O. box in Delaware. Match those against Chislehurst Holdings, Celeste said. Isaac responded next. Chislehurst is Sterling's only serious acquisition threat. They've been trying to buy regional assets for months. They could be using Blake to tank property value for a hostile bid. Celeste's jaw tightened. Then we stop the game before it finishes. Before she disconnected, Melissa added, we'll loop in Treasury Compliance and Amex Fraud Division. We may be looking at personal misuse of corporate cards. She paused, then asked, do you want internal notification to the board? Celeste didn't answer immediately. Then, not yet. Not until I'm inside. When she ended the call, Celeste was left with the chill of wind and the weight of momentum. The narrative was turning. The camera footage, the staged chaos, the hidden devices. Every detail Hunter and Jessica had curated would become the rope they hung themselves with. A town car pulled up. The driver stepped out, a young woman in a black blazer and flat shoes. Ms. Whitaker? Celeste nodded. As she climbed into the back seat, she saw Marcus watching from the valet station. His posture was stiff, eyes darting toward her with something between guilt and recognition. She didn't wave, but she met his gaze, long enough to let him know. I saw you. I know what you saw too. Inside the car, she began compiling her timeline. 12:03 p.m. Checked into penthouse suite. 12:14 p.m. Discovered room deliberately sabotaged. 12:25 p.m. Found first camera. 12:31 p.m. Found 3 more. 12:36 p.m. Initial confrontation with Hunter Blake. 12:42 p.m. Jessica Monroe begins mobile recording. 12:44 p.m. Removal initiated. 12:50 p.m. Security escort to exterior. 12:56 p.m. First contact made with David Rodriguez. 12:59 p.m. Legal mobilized. 1:03 p.m. Financial investigation launched. Timestamps. Documentation. Receipts. That's what she had now, but she needed one more piece. She opened the company app and accessed the HR network. Scrolled to the profile for Hunter Blake. Scanned credentials, length of employment, supervisor notations. Then she clicked View Submitted Personnel References. One entry was redacted. She entered her override code. The redacted line reappeared. Blake is ambitious and extremely cooperative in projects requiring discretion. Excellent resource for property repositioning. Ronald Ives, Regional Asset Manager, Chiselhurst Holdings. Her screen blinked. Confirmation. They'd planted him. Celeste sat back against the leather seat, her mind sharp and quiet. They hadn't just tried to embarrass her. They were trying to poison her empire from the inside, discredit her leadership, manipulate financials, and create just enough doubt to justify a forced sale, all under the guise of routine incompetence. The playbook was as old as it was ugly. Disempower the woman in charge, then offer her shareholders a stability solution. She looked down at her reflection in the car window. "You're going to regret underestimating me," she whispered. Then she opened her voice memo app again. Update log, 1:10 p.m. Evidence now indicates coordinated internal sabotage of Sterling legacy asset for purposes of fraudulent acquisition. Actors involved directly implicate known rival entity. Requesting emergency board session today. She hit send. The message would hit her assistant's inbox in less than a second. And by sunset, the entire Whitestone Regent would know exactly who they had thrown out and what she was coming back for. Jessica Monroe sat behind the reception desk, scrolling through her Instagram feed with the satisfaction of someone who believed she had just scored a viral hit. The video she'd discreetly filmed, Celeste being escorted out by security, silent but defiant, was now live. Captioned in elegant sarcasm, another entitled guest thinking the rules don't apply. Hashtag know your place, hashtag security first, hashtag luxury standards. Within minutes, likes began trickling in, then shares, then comments. At first, her followers praised her for holding the line and not letting bad attitudes ruin luxury spaces. But soon, the tone shifted. A user named @BlackLawMatters replied, "Who is this woman you just humiliated?" She didn't say a word, but she walked like she owned the place, literally. Another user responded with a screenshot, a blurry zoom-in of Celeste's name badge peeking from her briefcase pocket. Enhanced, magnified, and matched. Then came the post that detonated across social media. "That's Celeste Whitaker, CEO and founder of Sterling Legacy Resorts. You just dragged the owner of the hotel out of her own lobby. Good luck with your career." By the 30-minute mark, the video had been reposted on Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook. The hashtag #JusticeForCeleste trended globally within the hour. In the lobby, Marcus stood frozen near the entrance, watching his phone explode with notifications. His stomach flipped when he saw the still frame of Celeste, flanked by 2 guards, being led out like a criminal. He refreshed the feed, 1.2 million views, and growing. A guest checking in tapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Is it true?" she asked, holding up her phone with the trending video playing. "Is that your boss?" He swallowed hard. "Yes," he said before he could stop himself. "That's her." Jessica noticed the guest's phone and walked over. "Can I help you?" The guest turned her screen toward her. "This is your hotel, right? That's your staff?" Jessica blinked. The screen showed her own video, but not with her caption. This one had been reposted by @EqualAccessNow, a civil rights watchdog group. Their version came with context. Sterling Legacy CEO Celeste Whitaker was forcibly removed from her own hotel after hotel staff profiled her. This isn't just bias. This is sabotage. Jessica's hand trembled slightly as she turned to Marcus. "Did you tell anyone who she was?" Marcus shook his head. "Didn't have to. The internet figured it out." By now, 3 other guests were holding up their phones, showing the same clip from different angles. Multiple guests had recorded it. Some had even recognized Celeste in real time but hesitated to speak. Now they were furious with themselves for their silence. Hunter Blake emerged from the back office, fuming. "What the hell is going on out here?" Jessica turned to him, voice pitched low. "We've got a problem. A big one." Hunter raised an eyebrow. What kind of? She thrust the phone toward him. The image froze on Celeste's face. Her eyes locked on the camera like she knew it would go viral. Beneath it, the hashtag screamed, JusticeForCeleste, #CEO dragged out, Sterling Standard #racism. In luxury, Hunter's face drained of color. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. "We just attacked the owner of the hotel." "No," he snapped, trying to regain control. "We didn't know she was the owner." "That doesn't matter anymore," Marcus said softly. "Everyone else knows." Hunter spun toward him. "You, shut up. I don't want to hear a word out of you unless it's an apology for eavesdropping." "I didn't eavesdrop," Marcus said. "I watched, and I listened. You treated her like trash, and now the world is watching." Hunter advanced a step. "You say one more word, and I'll have you fired so fast. Too late," Maria Santos said from behind them. The housekeeping supervisor held her own phone, live streaming without hiding it. "Say hello to the people, Hunter. They're watching you threaten your staff for speaking the truth." Hunter turned white. Within minutes, screenshots of his face began appearing alongside captions like, "This is Hunter Blake, GM of the Whitestone Regent Hotel in Atlanta. He just forcibly removed his black CEO from our own hotel. Resign." Now, inside the Sterling Legacy corporate office, the PR team was already in high alert. Rachel Martinez, the director of corporate communications, stared at her screen while fielding back-to-back calls. "She's handling it internally," Rachel said into one headset while typing on another screen. "No press release yet. She's still assessing." "But we're getting buried," her assistant cried from the corner. "CNN is asking for comment. So is MSNBC, BuzzFeed too." Rachel nodded once. "Hold them. No comment. Not yet." She clicked into the Sterling Legacy social media accounts. In her inbox were hundreds of messages, some angry, some supportive, most stunned, but one stood out. As a hospitality executive myself, I watched that clip 5 times. I've never seen someone maintain that level of composure. Celeste Whitaker didn't just get humiliated. She orchestrated the most strategic silence I've ever seen. She knew it would go viral. She counted on it. Rachel smiled slightly. Yes, she did. Back at the hotel, guests were checking out early. 3 major conference organizers canceled upcoming events. The hotel's main phone line had gone down from the flood of calls. Hunter stood in the back office pacing, barking orders. "Delete the posts, all of them. Pull every video down." Jessica tried, but it was too late. The internet had already archived it, screenshotted it, screen recorded it. The original was gone, but the damage was permanent. On Twitter, Celeste's old interview from Forbes re-emerged. In it, she talked about building her empire from a single inherited motel, about how her mother taught her, "Make them respect you in silence, then make them regret underestimating you." The quote now floated above every video of her being marched out. "Make them regret underestimating you." The lobby buzzed with a tension that had shifted sides. Guests whispered not about the angry guest, but the powerful woman who never raised her voice. The narrative had changed. Celeste didn't need to speak. Millions of people were speaking for her now. 9 minutes after being forcibly removed from her own hotel, Celeste Whitaker re-entered the Whitestone Regent like a phantom made flesh, quiet, composed, and unmistakably in control. The revolving doors hissed as they rotated, admitting not just Celeste, but the future. Behind her came a formation of figures dressed in dark suits and purposeful silence. 3 corporate attorneys, 2 private security specialists, a forensic accountant with a steel briefcase, and Rachel Martinez, director of corporate communications, holding a slim laptop and an expression sharp enough to slice glass. Guests in the lobby froze mid-conversation. Phones came out again, this time not to mock or record drama, but to document what was clearly an event. Even those who didn't recognize her felt the shift. Celeste walked like someone who belonged. No, owned. Hunter Blake stood behind the front desk, face ashen, fingers twitching at the keyboard though he wasn't typing. Jessica Monroe was halfway behind the back wall, her phone suspiciously absent for once. No one moved to stop Celeste this time. She didn't glance at Hunter, didn't address the crowd. She simply walked past the reception area, her heels silent against the marble this time, as though the hotel itself had recalibrated its acoustics to accommodate her authority. And then she sat, right there, in the center of the grand lobby. She chose the same velvet armchair she had passed earlier, positioned beneath the towering crystal chandelier. She crossed her legs, opened her briefcase with precision, and began reviewing documents as if she were settling in for a scheduled meeting. Rachel pulled up a secondary chair beside her. The attorneys flanked the area. The security specialists positioned themselves near exits, eyes scanning but hands off weapons. The forensic accountant opened his case and began syncing his device to the hotel's internal financial systems through a portable encrypted access point. The Whitestone Regent was under silent siege, but not a word had been raised. Hunter stepped forward finally, forced into movement by the unbearable stillness. "Ms. Whitaker," he began, voice uncertain. "Perhaps we should speak privately." Celeste looked up, her expression unreadable. "No," she said. "This is appropriate." He hesitated, then gestured toward the hallway leading to the management offices. "If you'll come with me, we can—" "I'm not here to make a scene," she said, voice calm. "I'm here to bear witness." Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few clapped quietly. Others filmed. Hunter's jaw tightened. "You're disrupting hotel operations." "No, Mr. Blake, you've already done that." Jessica edged forward, voice trembling. "Ms. Whitaker, I had no idea." Celeste raised a hand, silencing her without raising her tone. "You had every opportunity to treat me with respect, without knowing who I was. That is the standard I expect from anyone who represents my company." Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. Celeste returned to her documents. Someone applauded. It started with a single slow clap from a guest seated at the cafe bar, then another, then a third. Hunter turned bright red. Celeste didn't acknowledge the applause. She never did. Instead, she tapped her earpiece. "Rachel," she said quietly, "press lock. Start the digital sweep." Rachel nodded and pressed a command on her keyboard. In real time, the hotel's wireless network was redirected through a mirrored server. Every internal device, phones, tablets, computers, was now being logged by Sterling Legacy's internal audit team. Hunter watched the LED lights flicker on the front desk's router. "What are you doing?" Celeste didn't answer. Behind her, one of the security specialists handed a USB drive to Maria Santos, the housekeeping supervisor, who had walked over slowly, her apron still tied but her eyes wide. Maria took the drive and looked to Celeste for approval. Celeste gave a simple nod. Maria turned and walked toward the break room, where she would load the files into the employee bulletin system. A copy of the whistleblower protections, civil rights policies, and a direct line to corporate HR. Hunter's panic visibly deepened. He moved quickly toward Celeste now, lowering his voice. "Look, if you want to handle this through the board, we can arrange a—" "I already have," Celeste interrupted. "They're aware." Jessica finally snapped. "Why are you doing this? If you're so powerful, why not just fire us already and be done with it?" Celeste looked at her, slowly, with something that was not anger, but disappointment. "Because the public humiliation wasn't for me. It was for the staff who watched it, for the guests who said nothing, for every future employee who needs to know that silence is not neutrality." Jessica looked away. More guests were gathering now. One young man in a hoodie mouthed the words, "That's her," as he nudged his friend. Celeste continued, "You were expecting vengeance. I'm not here for that. I'm here to ensure the truth documents itself." From the corner of the room, Marcus approached. He wasn't carrying luggage. He wasn't in uniform. He was holding a tablet. "I have something," he said softly, addressing Rachel. From the valet cam footage, Hunter told security to drag her slowly, to make it public. It's all recorded." Rachel took the tablet and gave him a firm nod. "You did the right thing." Hunter's face contorted, fury finally overtaking fear. "You little traitor." Before he could finish, Celeste stood. The room went still again. "Don't raise your voice in my lobby," she said. "Not at my staff, not ever again." Hunter's mouth moved, but no sound came. She stepped forward, standing inches from him now. "You're not being removed today, Mr. Blake," she said. "You're being watched as you crumble." Then she sat back down and waited. The conference room on the 32nd floor of the Whitestone Regent was not designed for confrontation. Frosted glass walls, soft lighting, a mahogany table polished to a reflective sheen. Everything spoke of civility, discretion, and quiet deals. But today, it would witness none of that. At 3:21 p.m., the emergency board meeting commenced. Celeste Whitaker entered first, flanked by her legal counsel and Rachel Martinez, who carried a thin, silver laptop. Behind them came two internal compliance officers and David Rodriguez, expression unreadable behind square-rimmed glasses. Hunter Blake was already seated at the table, pale, sweating, and clearly rehearsing the speech he hoped would save his career. Jessica Monroe sat beside him, jittering her knee under the table like a ticking clock. At the head of the table, a large screen came to life, the Sterling Legacy board appearing via secure video call. Faces from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, London, all frozen in a mix of concern and curiosity. Celeste didn't sit. She opened her briefcase, withdrew a USB drive, and handed it to Rachel, who plugged it into the conference console. The screen flickered. Then, footage 1, valet cam recording, 12:41 p.m. Hunter's voice. "Make it public. Drag her slowly. If she shouts, good. Let everyone see." Security nods. Jessica laughs off-screen. Footage 2, penthouse security log, 12:16 p.m. Celeste discovering the hidden camera under the sink. No reaction, just quiet extraction. Footage 3, expense audit summary voiceover from forensic accountant. $12,000 funneled through fictitious vendors linked to a P.O. box in Delaware, traced to a shell corporation tied to Chislehurst Holdings. Footage 4, occupancy misrepresentation, Jessica at the front desk, telling Celeste the hotel is fully booked, while live occupancy dashboard shows 58% capacity. The room was silent except for the hum of the AC. Celeste finally spoke. 3 hours ago, I was removed from my own lobby. Not by accident, not by protocol, but by design. Hunter shifted in his seat. "Ms. Whitaker, I can explain." She held up a hand. "You instructed security to escalate. You approved payment to fake contractors. You deliberately targeted guests of color to incite confrontations. And you attempted to devalue this property in coordination with Chislehurst Holdings to force a hostile buyout." She turned to Jessica. "You stood by and enabled it." Jessica's mouth opened, then collapsed. She looked at the board on screen, then at Celeste. I didn't know," she stammered. "I mean, I knew what we were doing, but I didn't know who you were. I swear." Celeste's tone didn't shift. "You filmed a black woman being humiliated in public and tried to make it viral. That's not ignorance. That's complicity." Jessica folded. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, I was just following Hunter's lead. He told me if I didn't help, I'd be replaced. I'm a single mom. Don't," Celeste said, sharper now. "Don't weaponize hardship to excuse harming others." Rachel added, "We have screenshots of Jessica's private messages bragging about catching a guest meltdown and calling Celeste another loud diva. She wasn't just scared. She was proud." Jessica buried her face in her hands. One of the board members on screen, a British man named Elliot, leaned forward. "Ms. Whitaker, these are grave allegations. What action do you recommend?" Celeste didn't hesitate. Immediate termination of both Hunter Blake and Jessica Monroe. Full cooperation with federal and state investigations. Permanent blacklisting from all Sterling Legacy properties and partnerships. And public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, signed by all present. Hunter's mouth fell open. "You can't do that. I've been in this business 20 years. And I've built it, Celeste replied. From a single 10-room motel I inherited when my mother passed. Every chandelier in this building exists because I refuse to let people like you define luxury as whiteness and exclusion. So, yes, I can. Rachel tapped a key. Another screen appeared. Social media analytics. Hashtag JusticeForCeleste. 4.8 M tweets. Sterling Standard. 3.1 M shares over 120 corporate accounts pledge support. The board members muttered amongst themselves. One woman from the Los Angeles division leaned forward. Frankly, Ms. Whitaker, this might be the most effective brand campaign we've ever had. Authenticity resonates. Celeste ignored that. She wasn't here to gloat. I don't want applause. I want standards. She turned to Hunter one final time. You sold your ethics for a backroom deal and expected anonymity, but you forgot one thing. Hospitality isn't about power. It's about trust. And you broke it. Hunter stood abruptly. This is a setup. You did that yourself, David Rodriguez replied. We found emails between you and Ronald Ives at Chislehurst. You discussed how a few PR incidents could lower valuation. Jessica gasped. You told me this was just to show corporate that we needed control. Hunter spun toward her. You signed off on everything. I didn't know about Chislehurst, she cried. Celeste looked to the screen. Board members, unless there are objections, I'll move forward with terminations effective immediately. No one objected. Rachel handed over sealed folders, termination letters, settlement waivers, and official bans. A second set of letters was already drafted for law enforcement and the Department of Labor. Hunter tried to leave, but 2 internal security officers blocked his path. Exit is through the lobby, one said, just like earlier. Jessica, still crying, looked to Celeste. Please, I just need one more chance. Celeste met her eyes with neither anger nor sympathy. You were given one, she said, when you saw me suffering and chose to press record instead of intervene. Then she turned away. Behind her, the screen still displayed the final slide. The Sterling Standard. Dignity isn't optional. The following morning, the Whitestone region stood silent under a gray sky. Its windows reflected a city still buzzing with scandal, though the hotel itself now felt like the eye of the storm, calm, exposed, waiting. Inside, the lobby looked like a ghost town. Checkout queues were gone. The concierge desk unmanned. The air carried a sterile chill, no longer softened by ambient jazz or vanilla musk. Housekeeping carts remained parked in place. Only a few guests lingered, most of them scanning their phones with furrowed brows. The media had been relentless. Headlines ran across every major platform. CEO dragged out of her own hotel. Now she's cleaning house. New York Times. From humiliation to revolution, Celeste Whitaker reshapes hospitality. Forbes. Racism, sabotage, and a CEO's quiet revenge. NPR Morning Edition. Cable news anchors debated the implications of the Whitestone incident, as it was now called. Social media was a stormfront of opinions, threads, video edits, and even memes. Celeste, standing unbothered in the lobby, had become a viral image titled Queen in Her Castle. But with the attention came damage. Within 24 hours, over 800 reservations were canceled across the Sterling Legacy network. 7 corporate partnerships were frozen. Stock dipped 12%, despite assurances from Celeste's office that reforms were underway. Inside corporate headquarters, the tension was electric. Celeste sat in her glass-walled office, surrounded by whiteboards filled with action plans, bias training initiatives, whistleblower protections, third-party compliance reviews. Rachel paced nearby, updating press statements in real time. Legal teams fielded requests from regulators. HR was coordinating regional listening sessions. They were doing the work, but perception lagged behind. At 9:14 a.m., her assistant entered, face unreadable. Celeste, the board has called an unscheduled vote. Remote quorum. They've cited Article 7, extraordinary brand risk. They're discussing interim leadership. Celeste didn't blink. Which board member called it? Clive Hensley, London Division. Of course. Old money, old rules. He's claiming your actions have destabilized the brand. That while your intentions were noble, the media fallout has made your leadership a liability. Celeste stood, smoothing her blazer. Then we'll remind them what leadership looks like. She walked into the executive briefing room, where a temporary setup had been arranged for the emergency call. 10 board members, 9 visible. 1 name grayed out. Unconfirmed vote. Clive's face filled the center screen, regal and stern. Ms. Whitaker, we recognize your commitment to equity, but this controversy has triggered investor panic. We must consider protecting the broader structure of the company. Another member, Mei Lin from Singapore, nodded cautiously. You've become the face of both our triumph and our turmoil. We're hearing from legacy partners who feel betrayed, blindsided. Celeste waited. Then, you're welcome to express your concerns, but you'll do so with the same transparency I've demanded from my staff. She clicked her remote, activating her own slide. Brand fallout versus brand failure, a strategic inflection point. The first slide showed the drop in reservations and stock price. The second showed another trend. A sharp increase in online engagement, new job applicants, and interest from younger demographics. We're losing legacy partners, she said, but we're gaining the next generation of guests. They expect accountability. They crave transparency. They reward companies that stand for something. Clive cut in. Ideals don't cover losses. No, Celeste replied, but stagnation guarantees them. She turned to Mei Lin. Tell me, how many CEOs have resigned after a discrimination scandal? Now tell me how many turned it into an opportunity to rebuild the industry standard. Mei didn't respond. Another voice piped in. Gideon Ames from Boston. Skeptical, but fair. And if we remove you, then you lose the only leader willing to face fire without blinking, she said. And the only one the public still trusts. There was a pause. Clive narrowed his eyes. The vote will proceed. Final tally by electronic submission. 12% stake requires majority consent. Celeste didn't flinch. Understood. The screen displayed each board member's vote. Green for confidence, red for no confidence. Green, red, red, green, red. It was tied. 4-4. 1 abstain. 1 missing. Still grayed out. M. Thompson, independent shareholder, 0.5%. Celeste allowed herself a small breath. She knew who that was. In the back corner of the hotel, far from the boardroom, Marcus Thompson sat in the staff break room, still in his valet uniform, a tablet in his lap. The email had come an hour earlier. As an incentive holder through the Rising Star Equity Program, you are authorized to vote on matters of executive continuity. He hadn't expected it. He thought his 5% stake was ceremonial, something symbolic Celeste had awarded him 6 months ago for completing a company-wide diversity training initiative with honors. But now it was real. He reread the prompt. Do you support continued leadership under Celeste Whitaker as CEO of Sterling Legacy Resorts? He remembered the moment she'd been dragged out, the silence, the guilt, the way she'd looked at him without accusation. Only clarity. He tapped, yes. In the boardroom, the final square turned green. Majority retained. Clive exhaled sharply. Very well. Motion withdrawn. Celeste didn't gloat. She simply nodded. Thank you. Now let's move forward. Hours later, she held a press conference. Calm, poised, not defensive. We acknowledge the pain this incident caused, not just to me, but to every guest, employee, and citizen who has been told they don't belong. Sterling Legacy will not rebuild in secret. We will rebuild in public, and we will set the standard. So, she announced the Whitaker Initiative. Mandatory bias training every quarter. Independent auditing of hiring and promotion practices. Anonymous reporting systems for all employees, 10 millionaires reinvestment into underrepresented hospitality students, public scorecards of each property's performance on inclusion metrics. The room erupted in applause. But Celeste wasn't smiling for the cameras. She was thinking of Marcus, of the quiet vote, of how change never comes from grand gestures alone, but from everyday courage. The fallout had scorched them all, but the foundation held. And now, the rebuilding would begin. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled every available bench. Their pens scratched, cameras clicked, and laptops glowed with the collective anticipation of a verdict that had become more than just legal. It was cultural. At the front of the room, a wooden placard read, "Superior Court of Fulton County, State of Georgia." Below it, the judge's seat stood elevated, commanding silence not through fear, but through finality. Celeste Whitaker sat calmly at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Patricia Chen and David Rodriguez. Her navy blue suit bore no designer label visible, but the cut and presence fit her like armor. She wasn't here for vengeance. She was here for completion. Hunter Blake, disheveled in a wrinkled charcoal suit that once might have conveyed confidence, now only emphasized loss. His eyes darted around the room like a man still searching for an exit long after the fire had consumed the building. Jessica Monroe sat 2 seats away, pale and silent, hands clenched into fists on her lap. Her lawyer whispered occasionally, but she rarely acknowledged him. She knew this wasn't a negotiation. It was a sentencing. The judge cleared his throat and began. After reviewing all presented evidence, including extensive audio-visual documentation, internal financial records, verified testimony, and multiple third-party audits. Hunter's head dropped. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Celeste Whitaker, in the matter of civil rights violations, defamation, unlawful detainment, corporate sabotage, and emotional distress. There was no outburst, no gasp, just the collective exhale of a crowd that had been holding its breath for 3 weeks. The judge continued. "Mr. Blake, you are hereby ordered to pay $2.3 million in damages, $1 for every dollar of annual revenue Sterling Legacy Resorts generated in the fiscal year preceding this incident. This sum reflects the symbolic weight of your breach of trust." Hunter's lawyer whispered rapidly, but the man only stared at his trembling hands. Jessica's turn came next. "For your role in digital defamation, intentional humiliation, and complicity in discriminatory practices, you are ordered to pay $175,000 in restitution and attend a mandatory 6-month corrective education program in racial bias and workplace ethics. You will also issue a formal, court-approved public apology." Jessica's face remained blank, as if too numb to process that she had been transformed from content creator to cautionary tale. The judge's tone hardened slightly. As for the security officers involved, this court defers to criminal proceedings initiated by the state of Georgia for unlawful detainment, use of intimidation tactics, and failure to follow standard de-escalation protocols. In the gallery, a murmur rippled as reporters typed faster. David Rodriguez leaned toward Celeste and whispered, "They'll be blacklisted in every contract review database by next month." Celeste gave a subtle nod, but just as the judge prepared to adjourn, a voice cut through the courtroom. Confident, composed. "Your Honor, permission to address the court with a post-verdict statement of public relevance." Heads turned. It was Maya Liddell, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the Atlanta Globe, known for investigative reports on systemic inequity. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You're not counsel. What is the nature of your statement?" "It pertains directly to the context of Ms. Whitaker's experience with this property," Maya replied, holding up a thin folder. "And, I believe, it closes a historical loop that began long before this trial." Celeste turned to face her fully now. The judge nodded. "Proceed, briefly." Maya stepped forward, eyes scanning the room as if preparing to recite scripture. 26 years ago, she began, a teenage girl arrived at this very hotel. She had been homeless for 3 weeks. Her mother had passed away unexpectedly, and she was turned out of her foster placement. She walked into this building, then under different ownership, seeking shelter. Not a handout, just a room for one night. Maya paused. Her voice softened. She had 2 A+ report cards in her backpack and an acceptance letter to a local pre-law summer program. The courtroom was still. Only the air conditioning hummed. The front desk clerk told her, "You people don't belong here." Security escorted her out. She slept that night at a bus station. Maya looked directly at Celeste. That girl was Celeste Whitaker. Gasps echoed softly around the room. Hunter visibly recoiled. Jessica's hand covered her mouth. Maya continued. The building was eventually sold, renovated, rebranded under Sterling Legacy. Ms. Whitaker bought the property 5 years ago as part of her southern expansion. Quietly. She never mentioned the incident. Not until now. She looked toward the judge. "I believe the people in this courtroom and the millions watching deserve to understand what it means for someone to be exiled from a place twice, and what it means when they choose to return, not with fury, but with justice." The judge nodded once, deeply. Duly noted. Celeste spoke for the first time that morning. "My silence back then wasn't weakness. It was waiting. Some lessons take decades to reach their audience." She turned toward Hunter and Jessica. "And some debts require more than money to repay." Then she rose. Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds. Cameras flashed, microphones extended. Reporters called her name. "Ms. Whitaker, how does it feel to win?" She stopped at the top of the steps. "This was never about winning," she said. "It was about finishing. About making sure no one else walks into a building they already paid for and still feels like they don't belong." Then she descended the steps, not just vindicated, but remembered. For once, justice didn't come with sirens. It came with silence and resolution. 2 months after the courtroom verdict, the Whitestone region stood transformed, not in architecture or opulence, but in spirit. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled. The marble still gleamed, but the soul of the place had changed. It now pulsed with purpose. In the grand ballroom, normally reserved for corporate galas and weddings, chairs had been arranged in elegant rows. Media crews filled the back, while employees from across the Sterling Legacy network filed in. The event was not billed as a celebration. It was an announcement. A reckoning turned into responsibility. Celeste Whitaker stepped up to the podium, her voice broadcast to thousands watching live. "Legacy," she began, "is often mistaken for inheritance, for wealth, for ownership. But real legacy, the kind that outlives you, is measured by how you empower others." The room quieted. Even the clicking of camera shutters stilled. "Today, I'm honored to announce the creation of the Ruth Whitaker Scholarship Foundation, named after the woman who raised me on a maid's salary, taught me dignity in silence, and showed me that justice doesn't need applause to be real." The screen behind her changed, revealing photos of her mother, black and white portraits from her younger years as a hotel housekeeper, and later, in her Sunday best, holding a young Celeste. Celeste continued. "This scholarship will support first-generation college students pursuing careers in hospitality, law, and social justice. We will partner with historically black colleges and universities and ensure funding for up to 200 students annually." Applause erupted. Not polite, but powerful. Full of resonance from those who understood that this was more than charity. It was redirection, reparation, rewriting. When the room settled, Celeste smiled slightly and said, "Now let me introduce someone who embodies what this legacy looks like." The double doors at the back opened, and Marcus Thompson walked in. This time, not in a valet uniform, but a fitted navy suit. The name badge on his chest read, Marcus Thompson, General Manager, Whitestone Regent Hotel. The crowd rose. His walk was confident but humbled. He bowed slightly at the podium before turning to the room. "I started here parking cars," Marcus said, voice steady. "I watched people arrive in Rolls Royces and leave in arrogance. I saw dignity ignored and excellence dismissed. I said nothing for a long time. He glanced toward Celeste. But silence was never safety. It was complicity. Ms. Whitaker didn't just give me a promotion. She gave me a path. He took a breath, emotion catching his voice. I intend to make this property more than a hotel. I want it to be a standard, a place where no guest ever questions their right to be treated with respect. The applause this time was longer. Some stood again. Rachel wiped a tear discreetly. Next came Maria Santos. When introduced, the staff clapped even louder. Many of them had trained under her, quietly admiring the woman who worked more hours than anyone and never asked for recognition. Maria stepped forward with the quiet gravitas of someone who had spent her life picking up after others, and now stood ready to lead them. I used to clean rooms in this building. I saw things no guest ever should: bias, entitlement, cruelty. I stayed quiet to feed my daughter. But after what happened to Ms. Whitaker, I realized fear cannot protect you forever. She paused. Today, I accept the role of Director of Training and Equity for all Sterling Legacy properties. My job is no longer to clean rooms. It's to clean culture. Laughter broke through the tears. Celeste stepped beside her, squeezing Maria's hand gently. Maria will implement new onboarding protocols, conduct quarterly audits, and establish mentoring networks for staff of color across the country, she announced. Her story is the rule, not the exception. We're just finally treating it that way. Later, as the ceremony wound down and guests filtered into side rooms for press interviews and catered lunches, Celeste slipped away quietly to her private office upstairs. There, on her desk, sat a sealed envelope. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. She opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter on lined paper. The words were shaky, uneven, unsigned, but unnecessary. Celeste, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What I was part of, what I allowed, what I enjoyed. I'm in counseling. I've lost my job, my marriage, my home. I don't say that for sympathy. Only truth. I keep seeing the look on your face as they dragged you out, and how you said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any scream ever could. I'm sorry. H. Celeste read the letter once. Then again, she folded it gently, placed it in a drawer. She did not respond. Not because she hadn't heard him, but because apologies, while necessary, were no longer the currency she traded in. She needed action. She needed system change. She needed men like Hunter Blake to sit with the rot they helped grow and watch the world heal without their permission. She stepped to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Below, guests walked into the white stone with ease, greeted by a diverse staff wearing pins that read, "Ask me about inclusion." On the lobby TV screen, a news anchor recapped the launch of the Ruth Whitaker Foundation and Celeste's new initiative being adopted by several competing hotel chains. Change had finally stopped whispering. It was speaking loudly now, through Marcus, through Maria, through every guest who would be treated with respect not because of how they looked, but because they were human. Legacy wasn't luxury. It was responsibility. 1 year after the Whitestone incident, the lobby of the Sterling Regent looked nearly identical to how it had the day Celeste Whitaker was dragged through it. The chandeliers still sparkled. The marble still shone. But to those who knew better, everything had changed. Guests who entered no longer arrived with unspoken hierarchy. No one looked twice at a black woman in a designer suit. No one whispered judgment at a mother with 2 toddlers. The staff had memorized more than guest preferences. They had internalized a new culture. They called it the Sterling Standard. Implemented across all 60 properties in the Sterling Legacy Resorts chain, the standard became a model not just for hospitality, but for accountability. Every employee, from housekeepers to general managers, underwent quarterly bias training. Anonymous complaint systems were taken seriously. Promotions required not just performance, but proof of equitable leadership. The data followed. Employee retention rose 28% across the network. Guest satisfaction scores among minority travelers soared. Incidents of discriminatory behavior dropped by 81%. But beyond the numbers, the impact was cultural, palpable, permanent. Other industries noticed. Retail chains began replicating the model. Luxury brands hosted inclusion workshops led by Sterling staff. Airlines requested bias intervention protocols. Universities adopted Celeste's training framework for their administrative teams. What had begun as humiliation had become a quiet revolution. Inside the Whitestone, Marcus Thompson now walked the halls as general manager, not with stiffness, but with ease. His name was now engraved on the corner office door. His photo appeared in the annual corporate report. His leadership style, firm, empathetic, and deeply informed by lived experience, had made the flagship hotel stronger than ever. He paused at the front desk mid-morning, nodding at a new concierge. "Everything smooth today, Jasmine?" "Yes, Mr. Thompson. We had 2 guests ask if they could tour the back-of-house operations. Said they read about us in Harvard Business Review." Marcus grinned. "Let them in. Real hospitality doesn't hide." Across the lobby, Maria Santos was leading a training session in the staff lounge. Her voice was steady, her tone passionate. "Diversity isn't a box you check," she told the group. "It's a lens you choose to see through every single day. When a guest walks in, you have one job: make them feel like they belong, because they do." The trainees listened closely. Many of them were immigrants, first-generation workers, or young adults stepping into the professional world for the first time. Maria knew how that felt. She carried a laminated page in her binder, her own handwritten log of past discrimination incidents. She didn't show it to shame the past, but to prove that history can be rewritten. Upstairs, in the penthouse suite where everything had once gone wrong, Celeste now hosted quarterly equity summits. She no longer needed to arrive in disguise. The room bore no shadows now, only light. This quarter's gathering included representatives from Fortune 100 companies, 3 senators, and the head of the National Hospitality Alliance. They had come not just to listen, but to learn. Celeste stood at the head of the room, once again in navy, always unassuming. "Real change doesn't come from viral moments," she said. "It comes from structure, from policy, from consequences." She clicked the remote. On screen appeared the phrase now etched into Sterling's company charter: "Inclusion isn't decoration, it's infrastructure." After the summit, she took the elevator down, not to exit, but to observe. That was still her favorite part, blending into the space she built, watching it evolve. As she stepped into the lobby, she spotted a familiar figure. Marcus stood near the entrance, watching a young girl, no older than 17, walk through the revolving doors. She wore jeans 2 sizes too big, a thrifted coat, and shoes that had seen better days. Her backpack was torn at the seams. Her eyes darted around with hesitation, not fear, but unfamiliarity. She approached the desk, clearing her throat. Hi. I'm not here to stay. Can I use your bathroom, please?" The receptionist began to respond, but Marcus stepped in gently. He smiled. "Of course," he said. "Right down that hallway. And when you're done, come back. I'd like to offer you a cup of tea. No rush." The girl blinked. "Really?" "Really," Marcus said. "You're safe here." She nodded slowly, then walked off. He watched her go. Celeste approached. "She reminds you of someone?" she asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "She reminds me of me." He turned to her. "And maybe a little of you, too." Celeste smiled. She just might. They stood in quiet understanding for a moment, watching the rhythm of the lobby unfold. "You know," Marcus said, "this job used to scare me. I thought I'd mess it up, lose control. And now? Now I know that control isn't the goal," he said. "Trust is." Celeste nodded. "Then you've already mastered it." Before she could turn, he added something soft, something she would carry longer than any headline. "I tell every new hire the same thing now," Marcus said. "When someone walks through those doors, they don't need to prove they belong. That's our job. That's the legacy." She looked at him, truly looked, and said, "That's exactly right." In a corner of the lobby, a little girl pointed to the ceiling. "Mom, look! The stars are inside." Her mother smiled. "That's a chandelier, baby." "No," the girl said firmly. "It's a star hotel." She wasn't wrong, because under that ceiling, in that building once stained with injustice, now stood the foundation of a quiet revolution. One not built on outrage, but on rebuilding. Not powered by anger, but by courage. Not shouted through megaphones, but whispered through every dignified interaction. Celeste turned, walking back through the lobby, not as a CEO asserting dominance, but as a leader witnessing a legacy fulfilled. Behind her, Marcus greeted the young girl returning from the restroom. She stood hesitantly near the desk. He smiled again and said warmly, "I used to be a kid like you, right here in this lobby. And let me tell you something. In this place, everyone deserves to feel welcome."